back to NFL Spotlight. I am your host, Ari Meirov. We are rolling on with our team-by-team previews. And next up, it is the Minnesota Vikings. And joining me today, he is one of the very best at covering this team. You know his work from Purple Insider on Substack, his must-listen Purple Insider podcast, and his book, Football is a Numbers Game, which I have right here. It is Matthew Coller. Matthew, great to have you on, my friend. How's everything going?
Hey, that is a cool little feature there that you got the book there with you. It's great to be back with you, Ari. I love the new podcast you're doing. Love some of the Vikings guests that you have had on the show. So I'm happy to see it and very happy to be here in what I think is the most interesting Minnesota Vikings offseason that I can remember. Started covering the team in 2016. And this one, I think, has the most juice, the most excitement, and maybe the most conversation around the NFL since the Vikings, probably since they signed Kirk Cousins back in 2018. So it has been a fascinating training camp so far.
There is a lot to cover, Matthew. As you said, I mean, there is so much going on with this team, and I'm going to try to cover as much as we could of here in the next 30 minutes. And let me just start with a general question before I get into the players and the coaches. They had a 14-3 season last year. There was the upset in Arizona versus the Rams in that playoff game, 27-9, I think was the final score. The overall vibes right now in training camp, I know the quarterback is different, but is that sour taste gone? Do you still hear about it, or has everyone already moved on?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because at the beginning of off-season workouts, so this goes even back before the draft in April, when we talked to Jonathan Grenard, who's really become one of the superstars of this team, he said that they all came in with shirts that said more is required and that it came from a tweet that he sent right after they were eliminated from the playoffs. And that is kind of the mantra that this team has taken on, which is it's great to win 14 games, but more is required for them to get farther, to get deeper in the playoffs, that they've established themselves as a team that is very talented. They are extremely well coached. It is one of the better run organizations in the league. And that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the NFL Players Association anonymous survey, who constantly votes the Vikings in the top 2 or 3 organizations in all of football. They've spent all the money that you can spend. They've got the Pro Bowlers, the All Pros across the roster, but more is required to go deeper into the playoffs. And I've really felt that from the players. I don't think that it's just some sort of like, remember the Titans Disney kind of saying or something that they're taking on. I mean, I think that you've really gotten that sense from the veteran players that they feel how good this team is. I think every building in the league, the players going into a season, they kind of know how good their team's going to be. And the expectations for this team, when they look around and you see stars across the defensive line, stars at wide receiver, at tight end, in the backfield. They've greatly improved the interior of the offensive line, which really was problematic against the Rams. And now everyone's looking at each other saying, let's make it happen. And the, of course, most interesting part of that is that you have so many players who feel like they're ready to seriously compete for a championship, and a 22-year-old quarterback who has never played before. It's one of the most fascinating dynamics in the league because of that. And also just how many teams have ever won 14 games and then decided, you know what, we're going to go to a different quarterback. That I can't think of another example of that happening before in the past. And maybe, when the Vikings went from Case Keenum to Kirk Cousins, but that was really a team that was driven by the number one defense. Or I think Kyle Orton won 13 games with the Bears when they didn't have a very effective offense. But that was not the case. I mean, last year, this was a top 10 offense, and they still made this decision. So there's kind of these moving parts of the players. They know, they look around, they see how good this is. They know how good their coaching staffs are. And yet everyone is kind of looking at JJ McCarthy like, just do your job, and we should be a very good team.
Well, what you said right there is the key for me. And the reason why I thought there was a chance Sam Darnold might be back is because, like you said, the players know, the players saw this is a win now team. And of course, they were interested in bringing him back, but he had a better opportunity and more money in Seattle. So we know the situation now. You laid it out there. 22-year-old JJ McCarthy is the starting quarterback going to be this year. We had Josh Metellus on the show a few weeks ago. He had all the right things to say about JJ, but your eyes, you're there every single day. What have you seen from him so far? Is he ready? Is it a work in progress? Obviously, the players around him. Not many young quarterbacks get what he has, but is he ready for this moment?
Yeah, there's a lot of different layers to that because I think, in terms of his confidence, in terms of his preparation, and just how his teammates respond to him, everything looks like somebody who's a franchise quarterback. Like, just even the way that McCarthy handles a practice, or the way that he walks out under center in a preseason game and just takes control of the offense, gets everybody lined up, drops back, gets rid of the football. Like, all of that stuff has checked boxes of, does he pass the initial eye test, the initial smell test of, does this look like a real starting quarterback in the league? And then as we pick apart the layers, there are areas that I've been very impressed with him in practice. Number one is his arm strength. It's interesting to go back and look at some of the reports that questioned whether he had a strong enough arm. And from what I've seen after watching Sam Darnold previously, who has a monster arm, I think velocity wise, JJ McCarthy has no issues whatsoever. And I think you're going to see a lot of tight window throws where he is lasering the ball in there. I think maybe people forgot that JJ McCarthy was playing at age 20 through a lot of that season when he was winning the national championship with Michigan, and has grown a lot since then, and grown as a thrower a lot since then. At the same time, this is a guy that only threw about 717 college passes, and then comes to the NFL, plays one preseason game, has one training camp, gets hurt, and then now is back in his second camp. There's just not a lot of footballs that have been thrown in comparison to a Sam Darnold, who showed up here, even though he hadn't had a ton of success, years and years of development, working off the field, growing his body, mastering different throwing techniques. McCarthy just doesn't have that time on task, they like to call it, or just the sheer number of hours of doing this that someone like Sam Darnold had. And I think you see that at times. One of the things is just accuracy, touch on the football. Sometimes you have to, they've talked a lot about layering, where you're putting it up over a linebacker, but in front of a safety. And that touch on the football is inconsistent in practice. The red zone has been very inconsistent in practice. And I think that's because there's so many really fast moving parts. There's a lot of people in a very small area, and he's getting used to that. So I think at the beginning of the season, they're going to try to do things to mitigate some of the issues with just rustiness of not playing a lot and adapting to the pressure. And then the offense will start to open up as they go on through the season. That's even kind of how it worked with Sam Darnold last year. But you mentioned the supporting cast. It can't be separated from the potential for JJ McCarthy's success. I mean, we saw Josh Dobbs come into a game with this team with no preparation and won. We saw Nick Mullins throw for 400 yards. Let's not forget, Sam Darnold was considered one of the biggest busts of the last decade, and then wins 14 games. I mean, Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell, and you add Aaron Jones to that, TJ Hawkinson. Addison will be suspended for the first 3 games, but he'll be a big part of this as well. It's about as good of a supporting cast as you can find. So I think the message to McCarthy is, keep the train on the tracks. Don't try to be a hero, and just throw the ball where it's supposed to go, and these guys will make plays for you. And so far in training camp, I think that's looking like it's going to work, except Justin Jefferson hasn't practiced much because of a mild hamstring strain. And that is a little bit of a concern of mine, of those two getting on the same page from the outset of the season when they haven't had a lot of training camp. But overall, I guess the way that you would sort of encapsulate everything I said would be, do I feel like at this moment they have any regrets about letting Sam Darnold go, not franchise tagging him? My answer would be no. I think that they right now are very much on track with where they wanted to be at this point, and there's still some ways to go before week 1.
Well, I'll get to the supporting cast that he has when it comes to the weapons here in a second. But I think the most important thing of here for JJ might just be the offensive line. And the Vikings invested a ton there this offseason. They signed Will Fries to a big 5-year deal. They brought in Ryan Kelly also from Indianapolis. They drafted Donovan Jackson in the first round. They have their bookend tackles with Christian Darrisaw coming back from his knee injury and Brian O'Neill over at right tackle. Are you seeing tangible improvements in the protection and in the run game of those potential 5 there for the start of this season?
Yeah, when you say the word potential, that's what comes to mind for me because when you lay it out on paper, it should be one of the better offensive lines in the league. I don't think it can quite compete with a team like the Eagles at their best and most healthy that, dominated the league last year, but Will Fries adds something that they have not had in a while, which is a violence to his game. Over the last few years, it's been a lot of hanging on for dear life at the right guard position, at either guard position, really. Throwing Dalton Reisner in there and just kind of hoping, or drafting someone like Ed Ingram that did not work out. They end up trading him to the Houston Texans and making a big investment in the left guard position with a first round pick, somebody in Donovan Jackson that played left tackle last year, which I think speaks to his athletic profile, that he was one of the more athletic guards coming out. But there are questions here with this offensive line. I mean, starting with Ryan Kelly, who I think can be the most valuable player not named Justin Jefferson on the team because of the connection with JJ McCarthy and how complicated defenses are. But Kelly has had issues staying on the field for 17 games over the last few years. Fries is coming back from a very serious leg injury and did not participate in OTAs or minicamp and had to have a little bit of a slower ramp up in training camp. So is he going to be hitting the ground running in week one, or is there going to be a ramp up period for him? From Donovan Jackson, it looks like a normal rookie where when he's going up against Hargrave and Allen and Harrison Phillips, he's getting pushed back sometimes. I mean, there is NFL strength that I think no college can prepare you for. And we've seen that at times. And there's NFL complexity that no college can prepare you for. And there's been a lot of rookie moments, I think, so far with Donovan Jackson, but it's hard to project how that's going to come along through the season. And then with Christian Darrisaw at left tackle, he tore his ACL last year in the middle of the season. I believe that was week 8. And he's just coming back from that, just getting into the 11 on 11. So is he going to be ready for week 1 against the Chicago Bears, or is that going to take a couple of weeks? So even though I think on paper it looks like it should be great, at the very beginning of the season, is it going to be its peak? Is it going to be at its best? I have a hard time thinking that it will be. I think they're going to have to work their way into that over the first couple of weeks of the season. And then they're just going to have to cross their fingers and, pray to the football gods that the offensive line stays healthy. Not that any team has a great backup situation and nobody wants guys to get hurt. But I think they need this entire starting five to be the difference maker that they want it to be.
Or the biggest thing over here that we're watching aside from JJ going into this year is that five, and will they be ready, and will they be healthy? I mean, those are all questions leading up to week one, which is Monday Night Football versus Chicago Bears. Let me ask you about the pass catchers. You mentioned it before. Justin Jefferson is recovering from this hamstring injury. They're being safe with him. We got word Jordan Addison is suspended 3 games. TJ Hawkinson is a great tight end, but what is the landscape there for at least the first 3 weeks with no Addison there? Like, is there somebody in camp right now who has stepped up and could be a reliable target for those weeks?
Yeah, and they also suffered a very serious injury to Rondale Moore, who they had picked up in the offseason, and they felt good about where he was at and thought that he was going to bring a different dynamic. And then he gets injured, what looked like seriously in the first game in preseason. It was actually the first play that he had touched the football and ends up getting hurt. From that perspective, they may be making phone calls. They may be looking around for additional wide receivers to potentially add. But as far as behind Jordan Addison, that's where you get a competition going on because they drafted Ty Felton in the 3rd round. He's mostly been taking reps with the second team, and he's somebody that looks to me like a project. And I don't mean that as like a bad thing. They've had this before. KJ Osborne, they developed. Jalen Naylor, they've developed. But he looks like a player who's going to need another year before he's ready to go. So the guy who's stepped mostly into that role with Justin Jefferson down has been actually Lucky Jackson, who's a guy that was playing in the XFL a couple years ago. He's been on the practice squad the last couple years. I guarantee your audience does not know this guy, Lucky Jackson. But he's got a fascinating story. Just had him on my show the other day where he was telling me that he was working as a personal trainer, working at a pharmacy, like doing stuff like that, trying to make it in the XFL. And then he's been someone that the team behind the scenes has really liked for 2 years, but still you're talking about a lot of pressure to step right in and act like you're, Jordan Addison or moving Naylor to wide receiver 2 and him to 3. But the guy who's really probably going to step up into the limelight here with Addison is Josh Oliver, who is one of the most under the radar, I think, great players in the NFL. And I know maybe your audience rolling your way. Number two tight end is a great player. No, really. I think he is one of the best run blockers in the entire NFL, like an impact run blocker. And over the last 2 years, has 44 catches on something like 56 targets. I mean, it's been very successful throwing him the football over the last couple of years. They love this guy. I think what you're going to see is them play a lot of 12 personnel where you have Oliver and then TJ Hawkinson becomes your slot receiver. If you look at TJ Hawkinson's career, it's about 50% of his snaps using that PFF data. It's about 50% of his snaps that he's actually lining up as either an outside wide receiver or in the slot. He is a route running, pass catching tight end, and he can do that. So I think they're going to use a little bit of mixing and matching. Maybe CJ Ham, your guy who's been on your show before, maybe CJ Ham is out there a little bit more. I think they'll go the big personnel route a lot more than they will putting in someone like Lucky Jackson or Ty Felton as wide receiver three.
I love the Josh Oliver mention. I remember when he signed as a free agent, I think it was a 3-year, $20+ million deal, and everybody like went nuts as like, why is he getting this money? And he has been really, really good because he's not just a tight end. He's an additional blocker as well, and one of the very best at what he does. And he's so good that he got another extension this offseason once again for 3 years, and I believe around $24 million. So very, very big part of that team. Let me quickly get to the running backs here. Aaron Jones had a career high in rushing yards last season, which might surprise some people because he was so good in Green Bay as well. But they also brought in Jordan Mason in a trade with the 49ers, who had a pretty decent year last year, replacing Christian McCaffrey once he got hurt. How is that going to work out this year with both of them? Is Aaron Jones still the unquestioned number one guy? Is this a committee? What's the plan there?
Yeah, it's been interesting to listen to players talk about Jordan Mason because I think everybody's seeing the same thing, which is that Jordan Mason has looked really, really good at camp so far. And I know they're not tackling and so forth, but when you see a guy who already averages 5 yards carry in his career with that kind of size move like he does, I mean, he's listed, I think, at 220 maybe, but I think he's a little bit bigger than that. And yet, he has great footwork, really good vision, and what I've seen is them doing a little bit more of that outside zone type of stuff that fit him extremely well with the San Francisco 49ers. So I think that they want it to be a 1A and 1B situation. The thing that Aaron Jones brings to the table, though, is, well, one, he's very good in pass protection. You can have him, even for a little guy, you can have him out there in any scenario, but also he's one of the best pass catching running backs in the league. He is one of, I don't know, 3 running backs that you'd be comfortable with putting in the slot, putting as an outside wide receiver. And they've actually done that. You know, every coach says, oh, yeah, we want to put our running back in the slot. And then they never actually do it because they don't trust him. Aaron Jones does that sometimes. I would be really interested if they put them on the field at the same time, but I don't think it's 1993 anymore. And teams usually don't do that too much. But that this kind of talent combination, I think, is very similar to early in AJ Dillon's career in Green Bay, where they want to see those two kind of create a thunder and lightning type of backfield. And Kevin O'Connell told us at the owners' meetings that he felt like the best version of Aaron Jones is going to be when he's part of a duo. And I think they have one of the best duos in the NFL together with these two guys if, you know, they both stay healthy, which is a big question when you have a running back like Aaron Jones, who is getting a little long in the tooth and is coming off of a heavy, heavy workload for last year, which I don't think that they initially anticipated him having to carry the entire load last year. So they don't want him to do that again. But this is the biggest area of upgrade. Like when we talk about, you know, Darnold leaving and McCarthy coming in, it's not, even though it's the same team, it's not the same team. I mean, it is quite different in the offensive line from a run blocking perspective, and it's quite a bit different in the backfield. Last year, I mean, you saw it week 18 against Detroit. They got the ball at the 5-yard line, couldn't get it in the end zone. I think they specifically went out and tried to get Jordan Mason to say, this time, we're not going to put it all on the quarterback's shoulders in the red zone. Jordan Mason's going to be able to take care of business there.
I think we did a my favorite free agent additions here on the show in late March, and I mentioned Jordan Mason as one of my five. I know it was more of a trade than a free agent addition, but It was such a low key thing that nobody really noticed because I think it happened on a Saturday night. It was after the first and second wave of free agency, but I think he could be a really, really important part for this team going into this year. Aaron Jones will turn 31 years old in December. So, of course, you want to keep him going once you get down there in December and potentially January. Let me flip over to the defense over here. I look at this defense, Matthew, and there are a bunch of guys here who are really, really solid, good players. Some of them I would even put in the star category, like a Jonathan Grenard and even like an Andrew Van Ginkel, who was awesome last year. When you look at all the names who are on here, I mean, some of these guys are not household names. Josh Metellus, Byron Murphy, Javon Hargrave was signed, Jonathan Allen was signed. Brian Flores is awesome at what he does. Could this be a potential top five defense in football that no one's really talking about?
Yeah, I think that it could be. I mean, last year they finished fifth in scoring. The one thing that helped them, though, was playing the AFC South. I think you and I could have cracked the top 10 if we were out there against the AFC South. It's pretty brutal. That's not the case for this year. They're playing the NFC East and the AFC North. So that means seeing Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, and whoever plays for Cleveland. But you're talking about the Super Bowl champion team that was in the NFC Championship. The Dallas Cowboys, as much of a drama festival as they are and struggled last year, they are only 2 years removed from having the number one offense in the entire NFL. I mean, it's a very hard schedule. And then you look at the NFC North, you're talking about, the Packers have been consistently a good offense with Matt LaFleur, an elite offense with the Detroit Lions. I mean, this is the reason that they had to go out and spend. It's also, I mean, it's tied into why JJ McCarthy is the quarterback, because if you paid Sam Darnold, it would have been a lot harder to add guys like Javon Hargrave, guys like Jonathan Allen, and then keep someone like Byron Murphy, who I think is maybe you talk about underappreciated or underrated players. It's like the Vikings have a bunch of guys on their defense who are all really, really good at their jobs, but none of them have, I don't know, like marketing deals or something. Byron Murphy has been a massively important corner to this team. In 2023, he went out late in the season and they just fell apart in the secondary. So he's been enormous for them. Blake Cashman is a really big addition for them last year. Linebacker, he's become kind of the centerpiece of getting the play calls in, reorganizing the D line based on what he sees and things like that. I also think with 3 years with Brian Flores, he's really mastered what everybody does well and is constantly shape shifting to who they're playing. And now what's going to be different is in the years past, it was Flores blitz, Flores blitz. That's what everybody talked about because he was always sending five, always sending six. I don't think he has to do that as much this year. I think by adding interior players who can get after the passer by themselves, that's the different dynamic that now he can play lots of different types of coverages and use deception on the back end without having to make the same amount of sacrifice, which I think eventually teams did start to figure out in the second half of the season, some of the blitz stuff. Now he doesn't have to do that. So what I think they have is, I mean, it's hard to say, are they fifth? Are they fourth? Are they ninth? Whatever it might be. I think it's easier to say they can go toe to toe. Like when Lamar Jackson comes to town, when the Eagles come to town, when the best offenses in the league are going to play against you, you don't feel like you're walking in starting with 30 points on the board for the other team. You feel like you can go to battle with the best offenses in the NFL with this defense.
I have two more questions here on the defense. First of all, the new addition, we mentioned them a second ago, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. After my people, they were released by their teams. So how have they looked so far? Are those guys looking good? Are they looking a little bit older than what they are? I mean, how much of an impact are those two big additions in the middle going to make?
Yeah, I mean, so far, the biggest thing for Kevin O'Connell and the way that he handles training camp is he wants to go into week one with every single player on his team. And this is why he doesn't play many starters in the preseason. It's why they have the joint practices to try to ramp it up because he believes in health being a huge dictating factor to success. And I agree with him. So there's been some veteran days out there for those guys. But I think overall, I mean, when you consider the injuries that both of them had, it looked like initially it was a Jonathan Allen season-ending injury, and it turned out not to be. So he comes back in the playoffs and plays great against the Detroit Lions. I think he had 7 pressures in that game. And then with Hargrave, that's an injury that we've seen other guys have I think it was Danielle Hunter had something similar and, came back and continued to play really well after that. Not something that the team felt like is going to plague them. Like once you get the surgery, once you do the recovery, you should be good to go. I think Hargrave specifically has looked like he's had kind of a chip on his shoulder. Maybe that's, poor Donovan Jackson having to face one of the better pass rushing interior guys of the last 10 years. But Hargrave to me has really stood out. I think both of them have. And this is where, with JJ McCarthy, I think when he gets to week one and faces the Chicago Bears and not his own defense, he's going to say, oh, it's not as hard as it's been in training camp. I think they really like that element. The defense has been pretty dominating in the front, and we've gotten a real preview of what that can be. But it is, as you said, important to note that anytime you're talking about guys getting released by their own teams, even if salary cap is a part of that, anytime you're talking about recent injury history, you do wonder about, are they going to continue to perform at the same level? And if there's one area where you might have a little bit of concern, it's against the run. And they have a lot of great tacklers on the rest of the field, but you're talking about facing some of the best running teams in the league, the Lions, the Eagles. I mean, these teams are going to run the football, and are they going to be Allen and Hargrave able to shut down the middle of the field there, or is their role more of just getting after the passer, and then they're going to have to use other rotational players to try to slow down the run? That's probably the only question that I would have right now.
Quickly go here to the back end of the defense. There was a departure there with Cam Bynum leaving. Josh Metellus was a little bit heartbroken about that as his dance partner, but they're gonna figure out that celebration later. But let me just talk about the overall back end over here. Byron Murphy is outstanding, like we spoke about. Josh Metellus plays kind of everywhere. Harrison Smith just never ages some way somehow. And then there's a situation there with the other cornerback spot. I mean, Jeff Okudah's on this team. He was signed this offseason. Isaiah Rodgers was signed this offseason to a nice deal as well. Who is going to be the consistent starter there on the other side?
Yeah, it's going to be Isaiah Rodgers. So the Vikings like to use a lot of three safeties on the field at the same time, which is kind of rare. Theo Jackson is another guy that is stepping into a much bigger role than he's ever had before. And I think we're also going to see Josh Metellus play some traditional safety and then have Jeff Okudah on the field. They could also put Dallas Turner, who's a major part of this as well, as a former first round pick. They could put him in and move Andrew Van Ginkel to linebacker. Like there's a ton of moving parts here that Brian Flores can be happy with. I think is still the biggest question is how the secondary is going to perform. Now in training camp, I think they've looked really good. Also, Justin Jefferson hasn't been practicing, so that helps you look pretty good. We know what Murphy can do, but with Rodgers, he's such an interesting case because he was an ascending player for the Indianapolis Colts, got suspended because of a gambling issue where someone else was using his account to place bets, and so he was suspended for a year. It must have, I don't know, the whole details of that situation, but it must not have been bad enough to be banned for life. So Isaiah Rodgers then comes back with Philadelphia. They're kind of taking a risk on him a little bit, has a good season as a rotational corner for them, and now is getting his big shot. His sample size, and again, going back to the PFF grades, his sample size of performance to this point in his career has been really good. He's just never been a clear number one or number two cornerback on any of the teams he's been on. So this is a big jump for him to make, to go from a career high of something like 530 snaps to now, hey, you're expected to be out there for 1,000 snaps. That is a much different test to be out there for every single snap. And then the Okudah story, I wrote it the other day that Jeff Okudah is the best story so far in camp. That does not guarantee that Jeff Okudah will live up to his number 3 draft status, number 3 overall in 2020 because of that. But if there's anywhere where you can carve out a niche and fit nicely and just do what you do well, it's here in Minnesota. And we even saw that last year from Shaq Griffin. You talk about guys getting cut. Shaq Griffin was cut by the Texans in the middle of the season in 2023. The Vikings pick him up to be a starting outside corner. And of course, we're like a little skeptical about that. He ends up having a really good season. So I think that, with defenders individually, they all impact each other. And so the front seven impacts the back end. The defensive coordinator impacts how different players are used. And I think if you were asking Jeff Okudah to be your number one shutdown guy, lock down the top receivers in the league, I don't think that would be an ideal role for him. This actually might be where he's just playing in a nickel package and they can figure out what kind of coverages are working for him best. But I think, until you get out there, that will continue to be a bit of a question. It's probably been best case scenario so far, but it still is, hey, are some of these unproven guys going to hold up?
I think the defensive backs coach in Minnesota, Durante Jones, is one of the very best at what he does. He's
Yep.
also been a previous guest here on the show, and he is somebody who is just so, so good at what he does. He'll be a defensive coordinator in this league at some point. He got some interviews this offseason. So he knows what he's doing. And Josh Metellus, when he was on here, the last question I ask every guest is, who do you think should be in the spotlight in the future? The answer he gave was Isaiah Rodgers, which I found to be very, very interesting for a player who just got there. He's clearly seen something out of him so far. And Matthew, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every guest who comes on here. You are in Minnesota, you're boots on the ground, you know the team better than anybody. When it comes to people in that organization, player, coach, executive, who is somebody who should be in the spotlight in the future? And maybe we should target here as a guest on the show.
Yeah, it's a great question because I had about 8 different people come to mind, and I like that you highlighted Josh Metellus, one of the great guys. He was our media good guy last year. They call it the Corey Stringer Award here, and he would have been a great pick, but you're already ahead of me there. And then I would have probably said Durante Jones because I totally agree with you that Durante is going to be a defensive coordinator very soon in the league and has been on the rise for some time. So you've beat me to a couple of them. So I will go with another assistant coach that I think is one of the most valuable people in the entire organization, but does not get talked about a whole lot, doesn't get too many interviews and things like that. And that would be Keenan McCardle. He is the Vikings wide receivers coach who has been so central to Justin Jefferson's development that when he was actually not hired by Kevin O'Connell originally, it was Mike Zimmer who hired Keenan McCardle. And when Kevin O'Connell got the job, Justin Jefferson reached out to O'Connell and said, you got to keep Keenan McCardle. And of course, if Justin Jefferson asked you to keep the wide receivers coach, then you keep the wide receivers coach. And he's been tremendous at developing Jefferson, Addison. We've seen it from Jalen Naylor. We saw it from KJ Osborne, who was definitely the best version of himself here. We're seeing the growth of someone like Ty Felton. I mentioned Lucky Jackson. Like there's always receivers coming from the next level in major part because of the work that McCardle does. And not to mention too, but I mean, this is a guy with one heck of a career. Keenan McCardle was a 12th round draft pick. That is, I did not stutter. That is a 12th round draft pick that used to exist and had an incredible journey through the NFL. Carved out a role for himself early in those Cleveland days before they moved to Baltimore. Then won the Super Bowl as the leading wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Bucks, and he also was Stephon Diggs' wide receiver coach at Maryland. So he has had an incredible football life, and I think would be a great guest for your show.
Love it. You're finding the exact people we want to get here on the show, Matthew. And Keenan played from 1991 to 2007. Very, very long career. And that's right. 12th round pick. That used to be a thing, and that's where he was picked. And went on to become a coach, has been a receivers coach in Washington, at Maryland in college, in Jacksonville, and now here in Minnesota. We will definitely target him. Or, like you said, there are so many outstanding people in Minnesota at all levels of the organization, from the very top down to the executives, to the coaches, to the training staff, to the players themselves. I mean, there are so many great people there, and you cover them better than most. So, Matthew, I want to thank you for coming on here on the show, previewing the 2025 Minnesota Vikings. Great insight as always. Everyone could find your work at Purple Insider, Substack, the podcast, and of course, your book, Football is a Numbers Game. I have it right over here. Take a look at it. Great book. Everyone should read it, get more knowledgeable on football. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I said to you right before we went on that the podcast that you're doing is so unique and is so right up your alley, highlighting a lot of people that normally wouldn't get their shine. So I love what you're doing and honored to be a part of it. So thanks so much for having me on, man.